For my entire life, I, Elizabeth Ellie Vance, existed not as a daughter, but as a reliable, high-performing satellite orbiting the blinding, golden sun that was my brother, Caleb. We lived by the cruel, unwritten Hayes family mantra. Caleb gets the passion project, Ellie gets the pressure. The setting was Napa Valley, California, a place of unparalleled natural beauty and generational wealth, home to the Vance family vineyards, a 40-year-old estate celebrated for its robust Cabernet Sauvignon. This vineyard was my sanctuary, my first love. I could identify the precise mineral profile of the soil by age 12 and correctly predict the harvest date with frightening accuracy by 16. My destiny, in my mind, was cemented among those vines. But my parents, Robert, 60, and Susan, 59, saw destiny differently. They saw Caleb, 7 years my junior, as the romantic heir. I vividly remember the day I presented my detailed, color-coded business plan for modernizing the tasting room, a project I'd spent 6 months perfecting during my senior year of high school. My father, Robert, barely glanced at the binder, which sat untouched on his desk. That same afternoon, he bought Caleb a vintage leather jacket and a custom-engraved pocket knife because Caleb, then 11, said he wanted to be a real vintner. When I graduated high school at 18, ambitious and ready to dive into the management, my parents delivered the final, crushing judgment. Ellie, the vineyard is too romantic, too artistic for a girl with a head for ledgers. Go make the real money in the city. Caleb, though, Caleb has the heart of an artist. So I left. I didn't just leave, I launched myself into the financial world, earning a reputation in San Francisco as a corporate assassin, a consultant who could dissect a company's finances and expose the rot within 48 hours. I built a 6-figure salary, a polished veneer of professionalism, and a ruthless efficiency, all fueled by the decade of accumulated hurt and the cold determination to never again be dependent on emotional validation. Meanwhile, Caleb, 27, was handed the keys to my dream. He possessed the heart of an artist who preferred to paint his world in expensive, self-indulgent strokes. His management was a joke. He used the vineyard as a perpetual party venue, hosting lavish, unbudgeted influencer events. The core Cabernet business, the family's reliable cash cow, suffered from neglect. He invested heavily in disastrous experimental wines that nobody bought. My contributions from afar, offering to set up a modern accounting system, warning them about inventory risks, were always met with Susan's sweet, patronizing voice. Caleb is handling the creative side, dear. Trust the artist. You worry too much, Ellie. The chaos that ensued was predictable, like watching a slow-motion car crash from a safe distance. The call came on a Tuesday morning, shattering the silence of my impeccably organized corner office. It wasn't a family check-in. It was a desperate crisis signal. Paul's voice, usually booming with artificial confidence, was thin, reedy, and laced with genuine terror. Ellie, thank God you answered. We have a serious, critical situation. We need your help. Immediately. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He launched into a panicked recitation. A colossal $200,000 loan payment to the regional bank was due in exactly 48 hours. This wasn't just a regular installment. This was the final non-negotiable payment on a restructured, high-interest loan that Caleb had taken out 2 years prior, without consulting anyone on the exact terms, to fund his disastrous Pinot Grigio reserve collection, and as I would later discover, a new, top-of-the-line Italian sound system for the tasting room. The money, it's just not there, honey, Susan wailed when she got on the line, her panic dissolving her polished facade. Caleb promised the tourist bookings would cover it, but they didn't. He missed the last 3 interest payments, and the bank is threatening foreclosure. Robert and I have decided. You need to wire us $200,000 by Thursday morning. It's the only way to save the vineyard. You owe it to your heritage. It's your family. Ellie. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, the chaos from their end of the line contrasting sharply with the calm order of my life. You owe it to your heritage. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. They had denied me that heritage, handing it to the incompetent child while demanding I supply the cleanup funds because I had successfully followed the path they forced me onto. Let me be clear, I said, my voice measured, precise, and entirely devoid of the warmth they were desperately seeking. It was the consultant's tone, replacing the daughter's. You are asking me, your daughter who was repeatedly told she was too cold and mathematical for the vineyard, to bail out the financial mess created by the artistic child you celebrated, with $200,000 of my own capital. The answer is no. I am not wiring a dime. Paul sputtered in outrage. This is unforgivable, Ellie. After everything we've done for you. You've done nothing for me but teach me how to value my own worth and never trust a verbal agreement, I retorted. I am flying out tonight. But I am not wiring a dime until I have full unrestricted access to every financial record, every bank statement, every sales ledger, and every inventory report for the last 5 years. I will conduct a full forensic audit. If I find 1 cent of that money was spent on anything other than legitimate vineyard operations, the deal is off. Do we understand each other? This is not a request for a loan. It's a demand for transparency, and you have no choice but to accept. They reluctantly agreed. They were drowning, and I was the only lifeboat. I arrived in Napa the next morning. The vineyard was stunning, but the office told the true story. I worked in their dusty, disorganized office for 48 hours straight, surrounded by stacks of disorganized paper, unpaid invoices for frivolous things like influencer tasting kits, and a dizzying number of mislabeled QuickBooks files. Paul and Susan hovered nervously, occasionally offering platitudes, while Caleb had disappeared, claiming he needed to check on the most remote vines. The audit, twist one, the $200,000 was indeed the tip of a massive, rotted iceberg. My financial analysis revealed catastrophic, willful mismanagement. Debt scale. The total debt, including secondary lines of credit secured against the property, which Caleb hadn't told them about, and overdue supplier fees, was closer to $750,000, not just the $200,000 due this week. Asset depletion. Caleb had sold off half of the specialized fermentation tanks last year to fund a lavish, unsuccessful rebranding exercise, crippling production capacity. The fraud, the most damning discovery. Caleb had been routinely processing large bulk sales to a fictitious distributor called Napa Gold Holdings. These payments were being wired directly to Caleb's personal offshore account. He had embezzled an estimated $120,000 over 3 years, masking the transactions as legitimate, tax-deductible sales to keep the books looking artificially solvent. I finished my audit, the report a grim, 40-page testament to the consequences of unchecked favoritism. The vineyard wasn't just in trouble, it was deeply insolvent, facing criminal liability, and utterly bankrupt. That evening, I called a meeting in the quiet formality of the main dining room. I placed 2 documents on the table, my 40-page, impeccably cross-referenced financial audit, and a single, 1-page legal contract. The good news, I began, my tone perfectly even, is that I can save the vineyard. The bad news is that you are not simply $200,000 in debt. Caleb's mismanagement, poor hedging, reckless spending, and frankly fraudulent accounting practices have put the Vance family vineyards over $750,000 in the red. The bank is not just threatening, they are preparing to seize the property. Paul slumped, his face white, the color draining from his cheeks as he saw the evidence piled against his son. Susan covered her mouth with her hand, glaring at me as if I, the messenger, were the cause of the disease. Don't you dare blame Caleb, Ellie. He worked so hard. He's sensitive. Caleb worked hard at self-enrichment. I corrected her coldly, pushing the pages detailing the fraudulent wire transfers toward her. He used the vineyard as a personal ATM and fabricated sales data to cover it. That, mother, is grounds for criminal prosecution, regardless of how sensitive he is. The proposal, twist 2, I pushed the legal contract across the table. It was titled Acquisition and Restructuring Agreement. I am not giving you a loan, I stated, my eyes meeting theirs without blinking, my tone a flat, non-negotiable declaration. Loans involve risk and trust, qualities this family has already destroyed. I am proposing a structured acquisition. I will personally absorb the entirety of the $750,000 debt, satisfying all creditors, including the bank. I will refinance the property under my name and inject the necessary capital, $200,000, to get the vines ready for the next harvest and stabilize the business. Paul's eyes darted between the contract and my face, lighting up with a final, desperate flicker of predatory hope. So you'll take equity? 50-50? We'll co-manage. No, I replied, a small cold smile touching my lips. I will purchase 51% controlling interest in Vance Family Vineyards for the sum of $1,000. $1,000. $1,000? Are you insane? Susan shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. This land is worth millions. You're stealing it. It is currently worth negative $750,000, Mother. My $1,000 is a symbolic acknowledgement of the original investment. The real value I am providing is the $950,000 required to make it solvent again. The contract has two non-negotiable clauses. First, Robert and Susan Vance will retain the right to live in the main residence, rent-free, for the rest of their lives. That is my respect for your history and heritage, not for your management. Second, both Robert, Susan, and most importantly, Caleb Vance, will immediately and permanently relinquish all management authority, operational control, and financial signing power over the vineyard. You will be residents. I will be the owner and CEO. I paused, letting the silence fill the room, the scent of fine wine now mixed with the bitter smell of fear and resentment. You have 24 hours to sign. If you don't, I will allow the bank to seize the property, and the evidence of Caleb's felony fraud will be included in the due diligence package, making him a central subject in the subsequent civil suit. Your golden child will be your financial ruin. Choose. The decision tore the family apart for a grueling day. Susan called me hateful, saying I was stabbing the family in the back. Paul called me a vulture, saying I learned my ruthlessness from the wrong part of the financial district. Caleb, hearing the news of his impending exposure, finally emerged from hiding, his usual arrogance replaced by tearful, wounded victimhood. The final blow, twist 3 and climax. Caleb cornered me in the quiet darkness of the cellar, trying to appeal to our shared childhood memories. Ellie, you can't do this. I'm your brother. If you expose the financial stuff, I'll be ruined. I'll lose everything. I'll never work again. Just give me the $200,000, and I'll pay you back. I swear. He tried to shift from emotional plea to veiled threat, his voice low and ugly. If you take the vineyard, I might just have to tell some stories about how you treated Dad's private accounts when you were in college. You know, muddy the water. Make the bank think you're unstable. I didn't flinch. My eyes narrowed, the clinical rage finally surfacing. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single laminated page, a printed version of the wire transfer receipt to his offshore account, complete with the details of his fraudulent transaction. Caleb, you just threatened a financial analyst who has spent the last decade building criminal profiles on executives far more powerful than you. I whispered, the sound echoing slightly in the damp cellar. That wire transfer to Napa Gold Holdings is not a story. It is felony fraud and embezzlement, punishable by jail time and a destroyed credit rating. You signed away your life for a few cheap thrills and a new sound system. I pushed a different document toward him. A resignation and liability waiver. Sign this. It legally removes you from all vineyard responsibility, releases all claims to equity, and confirms that you received full and fair compensation for your past services. In exchange, I promise that this evidence stays strictly between us. If you ever come within a mile of my business accounts, or attempt to contact my parents to undermine my control, I will send this packet directly to the district attorney's office. You get to walk away clean, or you face prison. Your choice. Caleb, finally realizing he was facing not his sister, but his executioner, signed the document, his hand visibly shaking, his eyes wet with tears of self-pity, not remorse. 2 hours later, Paul and Susan, defeated, terrified of Caleb's imminent ruin, and with the bank's foreclosure deadline looming, signed the acquisition and restructuring agreement. The vineyard, now formerly Vance Family Vineyards, LLC, was mine. My first act as CEO was to hire a world-class vineyard manager, implement the modern accounting systems I had been denied the chance to build, and focus ruthlessly on quality over flash. Within 3 years, the vineyard was debt-free, profitable, and internationally recognized. The Cabernet Sauvignon, now managed with the care and precision it deserved, started winning prestigious awards. I had saved the heritage, but only by ruthlessly cutting out the rot. Paul and Susan still live on the property, but they are relegated to the role of respected, elderly residents. They host tours, talk about the old days, but their hands are nowhere near the ledger. Caleb was given a small, final settlement, enough to clear his minor personal debts, and left Napa, his dream utterly annihilated by his own incompetence and their enablement. He never returned. I walk the vines now, my hands touching the old, gnarled trunks, not as the ignored daughter, but as the owner and CEO. The vineyard is my legacy, fought for and earned, not given. I got my birthright back, but the price I demanded wasn't money. It was the total, unconditional surrender of the people who valued me least. The vineyard thrives, a monument to the ultimate triumph of competence over favoritism.